In the city of Nashville, some secrets are worth killing for. On a cold night in 1964, a young woman named Paula Herron was brutally murdered, and the case was closed with shocking speed. The police, the courts, and the press all pointed their fingers at one man, the rebellious son of a respected judge. It seemed like an open and shut case, a tragic story of a good girl and a bad boy. But what if that was the story they wanted you to believe? What if the conviction of John Randolph Clark wasn't about justice, but about protecting a dark secret that reached the highest levels of power in a city on the rise? This is the story of how new evidence suggests an innocent man may have been sent to prison, framed as the perfect scapegoat to bury a scandal that the city's elite would do anything to keep hidden. February the 22nd, 1964, Nashville, Tennessee, was a city with big ambitions. Just a year earlier, it had consolidated its city and county governments, becoming the first major metropolitan government in the U.S., and it was eager to present a modern, progressive image. But that Saturday night, in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Crave Hall, a brutal act of violence shattered the peace and planted the seeds of an urban legend that would haunt the city for decades. 18 years after Paula Herring was a freshman at the University of Tennessee, a bright and popular student, home for the weekend, that evening she was doing what countless other young women did, babysitting her 6-year-old brother, Alan. Her mother, Jo, a nurse, had been persuaded by Paula to go out for the evening while Paula stayed in to work on a book report. The book she was reading was Robert Penn Warren's All the King's Men, a story, ironically, about the corrupting nature of political power. Sometime between 9 and 10 p.m., neighbors heard a commotion, followed by the sound of a car roaring away, its engine making a distinct metallic clanging noise. But inside the Herring house, young Alan slept, seemingly undisturbed. When Jo Herron and her companions returned home around 11 p.m., they walked into a scene of unimaginable horror. Paula was lying face down on the living room floor. Her mother, a trained nurse, rushed her aside, but it was too late. Paula was gone. The scene was one of shocking violence. Paula had been badly beaten, but the cause of death was clear. She had been shot twice in the back with a .32 caliber pistol. The coroner would later fix the official time of death at 9:30 p.m. Strangely, despite the brutal struggle, she had not been sexually assaulted. The motive was a ghost in a room filled with violence. Young Alan, woken by his mother's return, told a heartbreaking story. He said he had woken up earlier to the phone ringing and saw his sister on the floor, but thought she was just asleep and had spilled some tomato juice on herself. Unable to wake her, he just went back to bed. The city awoke to sensational headlines. The babysitter murder, as it was dubbed, sent a wave of fear through Nashville. The pressure on the new Metro Nashville Police Department was immense. They needed to solve this case, and they needed to do it fast. The public demanded justice for Paula, but the path to that justice would become one of the most contested in Tennessee history, a path that for some led not to the truth, but to a convenient lie. In the frantic days after Paula Herring's murder, the investigation moved at a blistering pace. The media frenzy was relentless, and the police were under a microscope. They needed a suspect, and within days, they found one: John Randolph Clark. Clark was in many ways the perfect villain for the story that was taking shape. 26 years old and the son of a respected judge, Clark had a checkered past with minor scrapes with law that made him an easy target for suspicion. He was an outsider, not part of the Nashville fabric, which made him disposable. The police theory was simple and salacious. Clark intended to assault Paula, and when she fought back, he killed her in rage. The evidence against him seemed to fall into place a little too conveniently. Investigators learned that Clark owned a .32 caliber pistol, the same caliber used in the murder, which he claimed had recently been stolen. Then came the story of a bloody man seen at a motel on the night of the murder. A man driving a defective car that made a clanging noise, just like the one the neighbors heard. Clark's car, it turned out, also made such a noise. Perhaps the most damning physical evidence came from a dark suit Clark had taken into a dry cleaner the morning after the murder. Police got the suit, and forensics experts claimed to have found fibers on it that were identical to those from the new sweater and skirt Paula was wearing. An expert testified that it would have taken more than casual contact for those fibers to transfer, implying a forceful struggle. But the most bizarre piece of the evidence was the third bullet. 2 bullets were found in Paula's body. A third was discovered later, not at the crime scene, but near an apartment complex where an informant said Clark had been. Police searched that area one evening and found nothing. They left the scene unguarded overnight. The next morning, a bullet, later determined to have been fired from the same gun, was found lying in plain sight near the sidewalk. For investigators, it was the final nail in the coffin. For others looking back, it was a massive red flag. With this circumstantial evidence, the state felt it had its man. The Tennessee Supreme Court would later uphold the conviction, writing that the proof of the defendant's guilt is clear and convincing. John Randolph Clark was arrested, and the city breathed a sigh of relief. The monster had been caught. But as the case barreled towards its trial, unsettling questions began to surface, hints of other leads that were ignored, suggesting a far more disturbing reality. John Randolph Clark insisted he was innocent from the moment of his arrest, but nobody was listening. To understand how a judge's son could become the prime suspect in a murder, you have to understand who he was and who he wasn't. He wasn't a member of Nashville's interconnected elite. He was an outsider with a troubled past, making him the perfect setup man. Clark's life was a series of stumbles. He had a rap sheet of minor offenses, a reputation as a ne'er-do-well from a good family. For a police force under intense pressure, this history was a godsend. It made him a believable killer and provided a simple motive of a robbery or assault gone wrong. The public was scared, and a story about a bad boy preying on a good girl was easy to accept. But even as the case was being built, there were troubling signs that the investigation was less a search for the truth and more a mission to confirm a conclusion. The theory was that Clark killed Paula in a violent struggle, yet despite evidence Paula had been severely beaten, Clark had no cuts, bruises, or scratches on him when he was arrested. The man who supposedly fought for his life had emerged without a single mark. It just didn't add up. Then there was the crime scene. The copy of All the King's Men Paula had been reading was missing from the house. It was later found in a vacant lot several blocks away. Why would a frantic killer take the time to grab a book and toss it blocks away? It was a nonsensical detail that didn't fit the profile. Most disturbingly, there were whispers of other suspects that were quickly dismissed. The official story focused only on Clark, but the trial record itself contained bizarre contradictions. There was a witness who claimed a Dr. Murray Cook had told them Clark was innocent and that a man named Al Baker was the real killer. Another account came from a newspaper reporter who detailed Al Baker himself saying, Clark fired the night of the party. These were bombshell statements, yet they were treated as little more than courtroom courtesies. The investigation wasn't just flawed, it felt focused. It was like once the police had their eyes on Clark, every piece of evidence was twisted to fit their story, and anything that didn't was just thrown out. John Randolph Clark wasn't just a suspect, he was the answer to a very difficult problem. His conviction would calm a fearful city and solidify the reputation of the new Metro government. He was a sacrifice on the altar of public perception. The trial of John Randolph Clark began in the fall of 1964. The defense successfully argued for change of venue, moving the case to Jackson, Tennessee, to escape the intense media coverage in Nashville. The prosecution initially announced it would seek the death penalty, a move that underscored the certainty of their case. But the plan was mysteriously abandoned by the time the trial began. The prosecution laid out its case, weaving together the circumstantial threads they had gathered. They presented the fibers from Clark's suit, the witnesses who heard a clinging car, the story of his stolen pistol, and of course, the bullet that was found so conveniently after the police had already searched the area. Each piece of evidence painted a portrait of Clark as a brutal killer. The defense fought back, attacking the flimsy nature of the state's case. They pointed out the lack of any direct evidence. No murder weapon was ever definitively linked to Clark, no confession, and no eyewitness placing him at the crime scene. They highlighted the absurdity of the magic bullet that appeared overnight. They questioned how Clark could have been in a vicious fight without a single scratch. But it was during the trial that the strangest elements emerged, hinting at a darker story. The defense tried to introduce testimony that another man, Al Baker, was guilty, but the court deemed it inadmissible hearsay, silencing a lead that could have blown the case wide open. Then there was the cryptic statement attributed to Al Baker himself. Clark fired. Was it a slip of the tongue? A confession? In the context of the trial, it was treated as an ambiguous, unprovable statement. Despite the inconsistencies and the lack of direct evidence, the jury was convinced. The story the prosecution told was simple and powerful. John Randolph Clark was found guilty of the murder of Paula Herring. The Tennessee Supreme Court affirmed the conviction in 1966. They dismissed the defense's arguments, stating that the evidence was enough to support a finding of premeditated murder. The legal system had spoken. The case was officially closed. John Randolph Clark was sentenced to prison, his claims of innocence fading into the background. With the clang of a prison gate, John Randolph Clark, inmate number 62250, disappeared from the public eye. The city moved on, the babysitter murder slowly turning from a headline into a local urban legend. The case was solved. Justice had been served. For most, the story was over. But for John Randolph Clark, the story was a living nightmare. He spent 9 long years behind bars, every day a testament to a crime he swore he didn't commit. The human cost of wrongful conviction is immeasurable. The loss of freedom, the theft of time, the label of murderer that never washes away. Throughout his time in prison, Clark never wavered. He maintained his innocence to anyone who would listen. His steadfast denial was seen by the system as a lack of remorse. But for Clark, it was the only thing he had left. In 1973, after serving 9 years, Clark's sentence was commuted, and he was released on parole. But freedom wasn't exoneration. In the eyes of the law and the public, he was still a convicted murderer. He walked out of prison a free man, but not an innocent one. He tried to rebuild his life, but that stigma was always there. He was the judge's son who killed the babysitter. John Randolph Clark died in 1986, just 10 years after his release, maintaining his innocence to the end. For decades, it seemed his story would end there. The city had its conviction, the police had their victory, and the powerful had their secrets. As long as John Randolph Clark remained the killer, those secrets would stay buried. But secrets have a way of clawing their way to the surface. For over 3 decades, the official story of the Paula Herring murder lay dormant. Then in 1997, a man named Michael Bishop, a sales executive with no background in investigation, stumbled upon a loose thread that would unravel the entire narrative. He wasn't on a grand quest for justice. It all started with a simple favor for a friend documenting notorious Nashville crimes. Bishop began spending his lunch hours at the city archives. On his 3rd visit, Buried in an uncatalogued box, he found a manila folder simply labeled Paula Herring. Inside was a ghost file, a collection of crime scene photos and notes that had somehow escaped the official case file for 33 years. One document immediately struck him as odd: a letter from Beverly Briley, the first ever mayor of metropolitan Nashville. In it, the mayor seemed to be providing an alibi, explaining his whereabouts on the night of the murder. Why would the most powerful man in the city feel the need to proactively offer his location to the police chief? It was strange. The discovery sparked a curiosity that grew into a 2-decade obsession. Bishop began to dig, tracking down former neighbors, locating the original defense attorney, and poring over trial transcripts, where he noticed more and more inconsistencies. His investigation took him down a rabbit hole into Nashville's past. He learned that Paula's family had its own history of tragedy. Her father, Wilmer Herring, had died just 4 years earlier in 1960, in a death officially ruled a suicide. Mother Jo, the nurse who found Paula's body, later died in 1976 at the young age of 52. The more Bishop investigated, the more he suspected that the official story was a fabrication. He even consulted with top forensic experts to review the case. This was no longer just about a murder case. It was about a potential conspiracy of sex, deception, and power that reached into the highest echelons of Nashville's establishment. And Bishop, the accidental detective, was about to blow the lid off a secret the city had kept for a half-century. Michael Bishop's investigation started connecting dots that painted a shocking counter-narrative to the official story. According to Bishop's research, the truth wasn't about a lone drifter. His theory alleges it was about a circle of powerful, well-connected people whose secrets Paula Herring may have known too much about. This group, he claims, included prominent members of Nashville society, nurses, police detectives, prosecutors, and even Mayor Beverly Briley himself. The key to this alleged conspiracy, Bishop suggests, was Paula's own mother, Jo Herring. As a nurse, she was deeply enmeshed in this elite circle. The investigation uncovered that the woman who was with Jo Herring the night Paula's body was found was also allegedly the mayor's mistress. Suddenly, Mayor Briley's strange alibi letter made a different kind of sense. Perhaps it was about protecting his affair and distancing his powerful friends from a bad situation. In Bishop's theory, Paula's death was connected to the activities of these very powerful people. She may have known about affairs or other secrets. In this version of events, the motive wasn't a botched assault. It was to silence someone who posed a threat. This theory reframes the baffling elements of the original case. For example, one of the most glaring oddities Bishop uncovered was that no official autopsy was ever performed on Paula. The official reason was that the cause of death, gunshot wounds, was obvious. But an autopsy is standard procedure. Bishop speculates this was deliberate. A third bullet that struck Paula was never retrieved from her body. Perhaps some feared it could be traced not to Clark, but to someone else. The police investigation now looked less like an incompetence and more like a potential cover-up. Bishop claims the first suspect in the murder was not John Clark, but one of the members of this very drinking club. That lead was quickly dropped, and the focus shifted with incredible speed to Clark, the convenient outsider. The evidence against him, so circumstantial, now seemed manufactured to fit. Bishop's work, detailed in his book, A Murder in Music City, culminated in what he describes as a stunning breakthrough. He says he obtained a murder confession from a nursing home resident who claimed to have knowledge of what really happened. This confession, combined with the mountain of evidence pointing away from Clark, painted a damning picture. It was a story of alleged corruption where powerful figures may have been key participants in a crime and its cover-up. John Randolph Clark, the judge's son with a bad reputation, was simply the fall guy. Michael Bishop's discoveries, laid out in his 2017 book, were explosive. He presented a compelling case that a massive injustice had occurred and that an innocent man may have been framed. But revealing a new theory and achieving legal justice are two very different things. John Randolph Clark had been dead for over 3 decades, but his name was still legally tied to the murder of Paula. Clearing it became the final difficult chapter. The goal is a posthumous pardon, an official declaration from the state that Clark was innocent. This is an incredibly rare and difficult legal feat. Bishop has his evidence, his theory, and a powerful narrative of alleged corruption, but the path to a formal exoneration is filled with hurdles. One obstacle is a deeply human one: to protect people unintentionally caught up in the tragedy. Bishop changed some names in his books. To formally present the case for a pardon, at least one of these individuals would likely have to be publicly identified, something Bishop has been unwilling to do to prevent further trauma. Furthermore, the system is resistant to admitting such a profound error. A pardon for Clark would be a damning indictment of the Metro Nashville police, the prosecutors, and the courts of that era. It would mean officially acknowledging that one of the city's first big cases was not a triumph, but a corrupt failure. Despite the challenges, the fight continues. The publication of Bishop's book has, for the first time, presented a credible, evidence-based argument for Clark's innocence to the public. The fight for a pardon is more than a legal battle. It's a fight for a historical record. It's about ensuring that a name, John Randolph Clark, is remembered not as a killer, but as a victim. While an official pardon remains elusive, the court of public opinion has been profoundly swayed. It's a wild story, and it makes you wonder. The case of John Randolph Clark and Paula Herring is a chilling reminder of how easy the truth can get blurred. While Michael Bishop's investigation has brought a powerful new theory to light, Clark's name has still not been officially cleared. What do you think really happened that night in 1964? Do you believe John Randolph Clark was a scapegoat for a larger conspiracy? Hey, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. If you found this investigation compelling, consider liking this video and subscribing and checking out some of our more great videos you'll really like. It's all true crime, all true stories, so I hope you like it. The murder of Paula Herring is a story with 2 potential victims: the young woman who lost her life and the man who may have lost his freedom and his name to a system that needed a quick conviction. For over 50 years, the official narrative held John Randolph Clark was a killer. But thanks to the relentless 2-decade-long investigation of a private citizen, we now have a far more disturbing version of events to consider. We have Bishop's theory of a powerful clique shielded by their connections. We have a police investigation that seemed to ignore suspects that pointed toward this inner circle. We have a crime scene that wasn't properly processed and a suspect who was the perfect person to take the fall. While John Randolph Clark was released from prison, he was never truly free. He died a convicted murderer in the eyes of the law, and his conviction still stands today. The path to a posthumous pardon is blocked, and the people who hold the definitive answers have likely taken them to their graves. What remains is a cautionary tale about unchecked power and the corrupting influence of secrets. It's a story that reminds us that justice is not always blind, and sometimes the truth remains buried, waiting for someone with enough courage to start digging. This is The Dark Room. Be sure to subscribe and like, and check out some of our other videos.